Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara. And this month we read Strange Practice by Vivan Shaw. It is the first book in the Dr. Greta Helsing trilogy, and it was recommended to us by Connie. Thank you again, Connie.
Like always, we'll split the podcast into two sections. First, a spoiler-free discussion and our overall score, and then a more in-depth discussion of the plot and the ending, which will obviously be spoiler-heavy, and our individual scores for the book. But first, let's talk about the author. Vivan Shaw wears way too many earrings and likes edged weapons and expensive ink. She was born in Kenya and has lived in Cardiff, Oxford, and Baltimore. She has a BA in art history, an MFA in creative writing and publishing arts, and currently works as a professional freelance editor and proofreader. She writes about monsters both in and out of classic horror literature, machines, extant and fantastical, disasters and their causes, and found family. In her spare time, she collects terrible vintage cookbooks and very nice fountain pens and writes fan fiction under the pen name Cold Hope. She lives in Santa Fe with her wife, the Hugo Award-winning author Arcady Martin. And now, Barbara, you want to tell us a little bit about some of the background of the book?
Sure. The book was originally published on July 25th of 2017. The genres it might fall under would be urban fantasy, fantasy, mystery, paranormal, and horror, or supernatural. It is 320 pages. It currently has a 3.8 out of 5 on Goodreads, a 4.6 on Barnes & Nobles, a 4.5 on Amazon, and a 4.3 on Audible. And as of this recording, this book has not been nominated or won any awards. We also think it's important for readers to know what, if any, representation is in the books that we are reading. So for this one, there is a POC character in the ensemble cast, no LGBTQ plus characters in this first book, and no persons with disabilities either.
All right, thank you. And you want to give us just a brief snapshot or synopsis of this one that's spoiler-free still?
All the spoilers will be had right now. No,
I'm
just kidding. So, so this book follows Greta Helsing, and she is the descendant of the Van Helsing family. Just decided to drop the Van part, and it's not really explained why. And she is a doctor for the supernatural, like vampires, ghouls, werewolves, all the fun things that you've read about. And this book starts off with it takes place in current times, so our century type thing, and it opens up with these murders happening in London that are being attributed to what they call the Rosary Ripper, and then that somehow starts bleeding into the supernatural world, and so Greta and a little ensemble cast of her friends and familiars kind of band together to fight these killings and going-ons, and that's pretty much it without any spoiling, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty darn good synopsis with no spoilers. It's kind of hard to talk much about this one without getting into spoilers once you know everything, but we'll get into that later.
Because it's kind of a little mystery type.
Right, yeah, there's definitely some mystery there. So, what did you think about Strange Practice? And remember, no spoilers. For me, I enjoyed this book. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would enjoy it, in the sense that I really enjoy classic horror, gothic horror, the things that this is drawing upon heavily from in a modern setting. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought it would, and I'll get into some of that more in detail with the spoilers. But to not talk about spoilers, the easiest way to describe it is that for me, the book kind of went back and forth throughout it. Periods of I had to force myself to pick it up and read it because it was kind of slow and that the pacing wasn't what I wanted it to be. And then there were times where I literally didn't want to put the book down because it was so engaging and exciting and wanted to keep reading. So that would be the only reason I didn't like it. But overall, I enjoyed the book. It was a good story. I'm interested to see where book 2 and 3 go. And I mean, obviously, I'm into the supernatural stuff and the horror stuff. And so getting that in any book is going to be enjoyable. And I thought that the author did a really good job portraying that in a really unique way.
I enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed it maybe a little bit more than you did. I didn't have any issue with the flow as far as that is concerned. I liked the way the mystery kind of got fleshed out throughout the story, and it wasn't all in your face. It was kind of a little build up to what was going on. I thought the pacing was fine for me. I didn't have any issues with that. I like the characters. It was interesting to read more about them. That was probably what I was most interested in. The other plot, the actual plot of the story, I enjoyed, and it kept me engaged enough to enjoy the overall story. But I think the characters was what really sold me on it. I really like supernatural characters. I've always been drawn to books with that, so I enjoyed that aspect, and I thought the author did a good job with that, and I enjoyed a little bit of the humor that was in the book as well. So I enjoyed it.
All right, so as y'all know, we aren't going to go into our individual ratings for now. Got to wait for that. But our group score for this book was a 7 out of 10, which I think indicates, 7's a pretty good score out of
I think a 7 is a solid score, personally.
Yeah, I agree. So, follow-up question then, would you recommend this book?
Yeah, I would. I think it's a little bit of a mixed grab bag as far as genres is concerned. Like, you have the murder mystery aspect of it for people who enjoy that, the little supernatural for people who enjoy that, and maybe most people wouldn't think to combine those two. That might not be their cup of tea, but I think it works well in this case. I'm actually excited to read the other 2 books of the trilogy and to see where the characters go next. I enjoyed the setting in London. It wasn't a huge, I feel like you could have plucked these characters in this scenario, put it somewhere else, and maybe it wouldn't be a different story per se, but I enjoyed that it was set in London. That was interesting. So yeah, I think I would, for people who maybe are into one of those 2 genres. I don't know about horror, because I wouldn't say this would fall right into the horror aspect. I think it kind of toes the line for that. So I would definitely say maybe someone who likes murder mystery, and supernatural. I think this is for them, because I think the take that she took, supernatural world, was really interesting. She took different aspects of those, not the genre of supernatural, but the lore, the different lores of vampires and werewolves and ghouls and all that stuff. She kind of took in and put her own twist on it, and I actually really enjoyed that.
So I think similar to what Barbara said, I would recommend this book for the most part. I think that there's obviously crowds that you don't recommend some books to. I both agree and disagree, Barbara, with your assessment. I think it is horror in the technical thematic sense. Is it scary? No. Does it have horror elements in the sense that it's full of gothic horror stuff? Yeah. I think that genre-wise, like you said, though, it leans a little harder into the mystery and the supernatural stuff for sure. If you're into those kinds of things, like if you're into vampires and you're into all the other spooky, creepy, crawly things in the night, then I would definitely recommend this book. If you're not, and that's not your cup of tea, probably not. But I think for most people, I would recommend this. So for those of you leaving us at this point, as we finish up the spoiler-free section, don't forget to give us a rating if you like us, whether that's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon or wherever you guys listen. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram. In both places, our handle is @BadassLitPod. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a book you want us to read on the podcast, let us know. If you've got an idea for a bonus episode or something else along those lines, let us know as well. Leave us a comment, shoot us a DM. We'd love to hear from you. And now, let's hear a short preview of what's coming up next month.
Yeah, so next month we are reading the Southern Book Club Guide to Slaying Vampires by Greta Hendricks, which was recommended to us by Christine. Thank you, Christine. So a short preview, which you can find this, I'm assuming, at the back of the book, starts out with fried green tomatoes and steel magnolias meet Dracula in this southern-flavored supernatural thriller set in the 90s about a woman's book club that must protect its suburban community from a mysterious and handsome stranger who turns out to be a blood-sucking fiend. Going right into theme there for vampires again, it seems like.
Yeah, it appears we are.
Yeah. Patricia Campbell had always planned for a big life, but after giving up her career as a nurse to marry an ambitious doctor and become a mother, Patricia's life has never felt smaller. The days are long, her kids are ungrateful, her husband is distant, and her to-do list is never really done. The one thing she has to look forward to is her book club, a group of Charleston mothers united only by their love for true crime and suspenseful fiction. In these meetings, they're more likely to discuss the FBI's recent siege of Waco as much as the ups and downs of marriage and motherhood. But when an artistic and sensitive stranger moves into the neighborhood, the book club's meetings turn into speculation about the newcomer. Patricia is initially attracted to him, but when some local children go missing, she starts to suspect the newcomer is involved. She begins her own investigation, assuming that he's a Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy. What she uncovers is far more terrifying, and soon she and her book club are the only people standing between the monster they've invited into their homes and their unsuspecting community.
Dun, dun, dun. Now, I'm excited to read this one. I was reading a little thing the author was talking about with it, and he said that his inspiration for this book was essentially what would happen if Dracula came after his mother. was the idea behind it, which I thought was kind of funny. But
yeah.
It sounds like it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Now, remember, the second part of this episode is going to be an in-depth look at the book Strange Practice. So if you do want to read it, stop listening right now and come back when you're done, because we're definitely going to talk about some pretty spoiler-heavy stuff here.
Hello, everybody. I'm Megan.
And I'm Samantha.
With Literary Lushes.
And we want to tell you about our podcast. Join us every other week as we dive into a sci-fi or fantasy novel where we also drink cocktails inspired by the novel. We post YouTube videos of us making the cocktails.
And a lot of the times we even have the authors on, including Dennis E. Taylor, Marissa Myers, and even Angela Roque.
So join us because you don't want to miss the podcast that's been described as not taking ourselves too seriously.
And with that we say,
stay lively with your libations.
Now, for those of you sticking around for the spoilers, here we go. So we're going to start out like we always do for the second half of the podcast and figure out who gets the Badass Character Award for Strange Practice. Barbara, who is your nominee this time?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Fast on this one. I think he, with all his super powers that he had essentially as a demon, I think he kind of took that one for me because I think without him, they would have been up a creek without a paddle, as the saying goes. Yeah.
Nailed it.
Nailed that one.
Nailed it.
Woo! Write this down in history books, as this is the first time I've actually nailed one of those. So yeah, I think my vote goes to him.
Now, who is Fast? Is that his like a nickname or what? What's the?
You're the one who put his name like that on our character discussion sheet. So that's your fault.
So for me, that's a good choice. For the Badass Character Award, for me, I was wavering between Dr. Helsing or Greta, the main character, and Fast. I think that you're right, though. After you mentioned, or I guess reminded me, the entire cast of characters would have likely perished in this book without Fast.
Well, between him and Greta, because she kind of saved the day at the end too, but like he got the ball rolling as far as a lot of stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think at the very least, and if you're still here, you shouldn't be if you were supposed to cut out. But at the very least, I think that at the end of the book, Ruthven and Cranswell and Varney would have died had Fast not been there to help distract some of the monks. I'm going to go with Fast as well. I think Fast is a pretty clear contender for the Badass Character Award. Congratulations, Fast. We'll ship this award to you down in hell as quickly as possible, or Greece if that's where you are now. We'll never know. So, moving on from who wins that award, I want to talk about the characters a little bit. And the first character I want to talk about is the main character of this book, which is Dr. Greta Helsing. I thought it was a really interesting character. I thought it was cool that she's obviously a descendant of the Van Helsing family, but like you said earlier, I was also kind of frustrated that we didn't get a little bit clearer definition as to not only why the Van was dropped from her name, and like what point in the time that happened in her family history, but they didn't really talk about her history at all, except a little bit. We got a little bit of information about her dad.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but aren't Van Helsings technically vampire hunters? In the original Dracula, like Van Helsing was a vampire hunter. So I'm curious to know where they went from hunting the supernaturals to aiding them as doctors, because she inherits her doctor practice, or her practice essentially, from her father. who was also a supernatural doctor. So it's like, where did this part of their history start from is what I'm curious about.
Yes, I 100% agree. I would love to know, like you said, what caused them to change their family profession from killing the supernatural to healing them.
Right. She is, in fact, human. The only one, well, I guess there's another one, but the main human. Everyone else is pretty much supernaturals.
Yeah. I would say she's the only, quote unquote, main character
correct
of this book.
You get the most point of views from her.
Yeah. Well, the title of the book, too, Strange Practice, is talking about her medical practice.
Strange practice.
Her strange practice, yes. I liked her character, though. I thought not only like the aspect of her being able to heal the supernatural, and it was really, I really enjoyed getting to see her develop relationships and continue relationships with supernatural beings. And it was really cool to see, because it's different. In most books you think about like, vampires and mummies and ghouls and demons, and they're usually the bad guys, right? Like
it depends on what books you're reading. Maybe the ones you are.
They're generally literally defined as monsters. And it was interesting in this book to see just like another side of them, I guess, right? With their interaction with a human. And obviously in the case of some of the vampires, they have had a relationship with her and with her father for some time, but it was cool to see her build a relationship with the ghouls, because I don't think she had treated them until this book, right?
She has. Yeah. Nope. She has, because the ghoul chief, Kriok, I think is how you pronounce his name, has been seeing her for quite some time for his depression.
But the others hadn't, right? The other ghouls, he had to convince them that she was okay, it seemed like, in that scene.
Right, but like she has treated them, I believe, maybe just not in this capacity. Yeah,
because she made that one comment about being excited to see a infant ghoul for the first time. She'd never seen a
ghoulish, I think is what they called him.
Yeah, ghoulish, I think that's right. But I really enjoyed her character. I think one of the things I was kind of hoping we would get, and maybe this is just a weird thing that I was hoping for, and if it is, you can tell me, is since she is a doctor who works on the supernatural, it would have been kind of neat to get like some medical anatomy, like some of that kind of text in the book of as far as like what it takes to heal some of these different things and the like different techniques that she has to use. And we got a little bit of it, but not a whole lot.
We got a little bit of it for the mummy, or not the mummies, right? Because they have like to replace the bones on one of the mummy's foot, and that was interesting. She talking about how she would have done that, or how she would do it.
Yeah, carving it by hand, right?
Has done it before,
right.
Yeah.
So it would have been, and there wasn't a ton of opportunity since most of the book doesn't take place with her being like an active practicing doctor in the sense. I mean, she's helping her friends out as they get hurt after the attacks start, but there's not a lot of like doctor's visits.
According to you found that boring, so you probably would have thought it was too slow anyway. So like, why are you griping about that when you literally thought the book was too slow? I'm pretty sure that would have been slow. Like, here's the daily life for Dr. Greta Helsing and how she treats her patients. Like, really, you think that'd be riveting?
I think that might be interesting, yeah.
Okay, very interesting coming from you, someone who complained about the pacing of the book, but okay.
I think that would be interesting. That's just my opinion. I told you, if you think that's weird, you should tell me, but I think that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought she was an interesting character, especially seeing how she kind of felt alone, because, her father has passed away at this point of the story, and she has her practice, and that's pretty much it. Like, she is a workaholic, is what the book kind of describes her as. And it seems like in this book, she actually starts hanging out with her friends, having some potential romantic partner in one of the characters.
Perhaps.
And just, I think she's maybe starts realizing that she shouldn't just focus on her practice as much as that is her number one. And I think that was kind of an interesting take on her character, because it, like, regardless of who the supernatural person was, like, she was going to treat them regardless if they were quote unquote good or quote unquote bad. Like, she didn't see that, I thought that was neat. She pretty much treated them all equally.
Yeah, that's true. To kind of continue off of what you were saying before about her feeling alone, that they definitely gave an impression, the author gave an impression that Greta, I think that she felt alone, like you said, but I think she also at the beginning of the book had this thought that no one really cared for her. And maybe not like everybody in the world, like no one cares about me. I don't think she thought that, but there were a few times throughout the book where someone like Ruthven, or Varney, or some of the other supernatural characters we meet, make comments that let her know that these people really care about her, and she would have to fight back like emotions and tears as she's thinking about like, oh, like does that make sense? Am I making any sense talking about this? Like,
sure.
I just thought those scenes where they did that were they were sad in the sense that like it's sad to think of someone thinking that no one cares about them, but it was also really beautifully written in the sense that like you got to kind of feel those emotions with Greta as she was experiencing, learning that these people that she had maybe previously seen as mostly patients and sometimes friends actually genuinely care a lot about her well-being. I thought that was neat. I thought those scenes were neat to see the kind of that unfold in her.
Yep, fair enough.
Any other thoughts on Greta at this point?
No, I mean, I really enjoyed her character as well. She is a badass in her own right.
She absolutely is a badass in her own right.
Fast just squeaked on by there but yeah, no, she like kind of can take care of herself as far as being attacked by the creepy monk guy, that attacks her, and she pretty much takes care of it herself, even though she's like freaked out the whole time, but she, uses logic and kind of saves herself and then allows herself to freak out after the fact.
Yeah. That was a really cool scene. I want to talk about that now that you mentioned it. When it was in her car, she gets attacked by the monk who's waiting for her in the car, and you don't really know what's going to happen except you've seen. So the monks are this religious sect, religious club, secret society that are going around cultish like killing supernatural beings and killing
humans. They start off with humans, but
like they're practicing or something is kind of what the vibe I got, but. They obviously want to kill Greta. It makes sense because she's the doctor for these things that she considers that the group considers to be evil, and they need to be vanquished from the earth for the word of God or whatever. To see her put one of these things in its place by pepper spraying in her car was really cool. When it was there ready to stab her, and she turns around and just maces it, or maces him. I guess I shouldn't call him an it, and. I just thought that was a really neat scene to see that happen. And then, continuing off of that, the monk who tried to kill her and failed gets excommunicated from the organization for failing to kill a human.
Yeah. Well, not just any human. She's pretty much the glue that holds this place together because there's not a lot of supernatural doctors. In fact, it's her and one other one that we are aware of currently.
The other one being Nedja, right?
No, that one is just a helper. The other one is the doctor not in London. Like, he lives further away. He's mentioned briefly. But no, Nedja is just, I'm assuming maybe like a nurse practitioner. I mean, she's a witch. So I don't think she's a full-blown doctor. I think she might, I don't know. I think she's like a nurse practitioner type. Okay.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask you, while I just thought about that as well. So Nedja is one of her helpers and she's a witch. Was Anna any kind of supernatural?
Yes, half Voltron, I think is what she is. I don't know what that is. I didn't know what that was, though. That's one of the supernaturals I didn't recognize.
Okay.
So but she's half.
Part supernatural. Gotcha.
Yeah,
so Greta's the only one in her world, then, that is truly 100% human.
What do you mean in her world? Practicing?
Yeah. In like the people, as far as like the people in the book that we meet or that she talks about that know about this secret world of the supernatural.
Yeah, because we don't know if the other doctor is a human or not. She doesn't mention that at all. If he is, I just know that he has a practice outside of London.
So we'll move on from Greta for a minute and talk about some of the her patients or the ensemble cast that end up playing a big part in this story. The first one I want to talk about is Ruthven, which I couldn't remember. What is his first name? Do you remember?
Edmund.
That's right. Edmund.
Yes, Edmund Ruthven.
Edmund Ruthven. Also
known
as Lord Ruthven.
Yes, vampire with an eye.
Vampire. Oh, right. That's. I was thinking like physical eye, not the
vampire
not the
spelled with an I.
Right.
And he is your stereotypical vampire, I guess, what you would say from the lore that. Because the other one is vampire, and they're what are these? They call them like moon something.
I don't remember.
Okay, that's fine. I don't think you even know what the hell I'm talking about. You look very confused.
I know.
Anyway, let's go on and talk about Mr. Ruthven here.
I know what you're talking about as far as the vampire versus vampire, because they have many conversations in the book about the difference. And we also get some right. But I liked Ruthven. He was a very interesting character. He seemed like, now I guess he didn't seem like, it was really cool to see a vampire that lives amongst the humans, so to speak. Like he's very interested in human culture. He's very interested and has like dinner parties where, you know, his human friends will come over, meet some of his, or at least one of his human friends later on. But I just thought he was a really eclectic character for a vampire. He did have a lot of the stereotypical vampire weaknesses, like they talked about garlic and the sun or UV light. I don't remember if they talked about like religious objects being a weakness for him.
I don't think so. I think they say that they just get a headache being around religious, like churches and all that kind of stuff. I think
That's
I don't
right.
think like holy water is gonna like fry their skin or anything like that. At least I didn't get so, but he definitely is kind of, he sees himself as a protector of London. Like he calls it his city, his home, and he's like a benefactor to it. So he's kind of sees London as something he needs to take care of. And he's extremely wealthy, obviously, because all vampires are. And I think the book even makes a little joke about that, saying like, good investment and a long time to live.
They all
is why
should
they're
be
wealthy. Right.
Like if you're a poor vampire who's been around for centuries, you've done something incorrectly with your time.
Right. Might as well just go and step out in the sunlight, right?
To your comment about him being the protector of London, I thought that was really cool when as they were describing that like other supernatural beings would come to him for assistance. Like he was like the guy,
right?
If you needed something,
the one to go to, and like he pretty much opened up his home for all these characters to kind of hang out and stay and congregate while all these crazy monks are going around killing or trying to kill them. So he's definitely kind of like the protector of all these characters, you know, the one who kind of took them all in and helped them. And he's very much integrated in the human society, you can tell.
Yes. I liked his character a lot. I thought he was very interesting. It was cool to see how friendly he was, not only to humans, but to like the other supernatural creatures, like I said. And I feel like a lot of times in supernatural books, I don't feel like you see it often where the supernatural creatures are like really close to humans or really close to other supernatural groups. Like a lot of authors.
You've never read Twilight, have you, Michael?
I avoid it like the plague. But I think at least a lot of supernatural books I've read seem to like, it'll be like, you know, let's say like there's vampires and werewolves to go with your Twilight thing that you mentioned. Generally, they're
actually not werewolves, Michael. They're shapeshifters in that one, or skinwalkers.
I don't care. I don't care about that one.
Okay, well, you made a reference to it. At least reference it correctly if you're going to.
So anyway, you have different supernatural groups like vampires and werewolves, and usually they're not friends with each other. Like they treat them
enemies.
Right. They treat them like they're like opposing they have problems. So it's cool to see, at least in this small, you know, sect or part of the world, that, you know, vampires that were coexisting with humans and also were very friendly towards other supernaturals like ghouls. And did they mention werewolves ever? I was trying to find that.
She calls them wares.
Wares.
Because I think there's different types, like they're werewolves,
bears or
I don't
something.
know, bears or something, whatever the case may be. Yeah, she calls them wares.
So they are mentioned in passing, but we don't. There isn't one that we see in
not
the book,
one
though.
Character, not in this one. No.
That's what I was thinking. Hopefully, we'll see them going forward.
Ruthven does make the joke of like, oh, you know, if we were to go and murder all the people, we drink our blood, and then people would get suspicious. I thought that was kind of funny. So
yeah,
a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah. There was a lot of that kind of humor in the.
There was. I actually enjoyed that.
As did I. English humor, I think that that's referred to sometimes. British humor, yeah.
British humor, actually, I think is what you're looking for.
And they're the English as well. So I was on the same.
I get that, but I think they say it British. But anyways, yeah. So he's one of the vampires. He's obviously old. I can't remember, a few centuries old, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can't remember if he's like from the 16th century.
I don't remember when he was sired.
Yeah. Well, we don't know if he was.
Right. Sorry, I'm talking about other vampire. I'm using other vampire terminology.
But we're not quite sure how vampires are turned here either.
We didn't see that happen.
We didn't see that happen, and we don't. So, anyways, that's Ruthven.
So I think I'm gonna take the list a little bit out of order then, because I want to talk about Varney next. Since we're kind of we can keep the supernatural species together. So what were your thoughts on Varney?
Well, I thought it was interesting because when we first meet him, he is the character that first gets attacked by these crazy monks going around. Like his place was doused in garlic, and then they stab him with this like ceremonial dagger which they come to find out later has been doused in pretty much everything that could hurt a supernatural, like a little bit of this, a little bit of that hurts each individual supernatural for like a ultimate weapon against supernaturals type thing, right?
I like that.
So he's not really acting like himself, and he looks different. Like he's pretty much like aged quite a bit. Like he looks older. His hair is really, really gray, and all this stuff is how we meet him. And he is also very different from Ruthven as far as he keeps to himself. He doesn't like congregating with humans. He doesn't really go out of his way to hang out with anyone, it seems like, really. Just kind of keeps himself to, it's like your tall, dark, and brooding would be him to a T. And then obviously when Greta helps him and takes the piece of dagger that was stuck on him, that was kind of making him act kind of crazy or whatever, or not being able to heal with his vampire properties, he kind of goes back to what he normally looks like, which is like tall, dark, and handsome, apparently, from her point of view. I don't know. But so I thought that was interesting. But he's like he's a very recluse kind of character compared to like Ruthven. And then it's nice to see him kind of bring himself out of his shell, because like the whole time he was like, woe is me, and like they don't want me around, and I'm never good for anything, and like I'm just an awful person. And he pretty much considers himself a monster. He does not understand why Greta wants to treat any of the supernaturals, because he sees them as these awful things, like a plague to the human society. And I think she changes her mind, or she helps him change his mind about his self-loathing, and
Yes.
as well as how he feels for the other characters as well. And he is like a vampire with a Y, which they are distinct differences. Like he is bothered by the sun, but not really. It didn't seem like as much. Maybe did you understand? Like, could he actually walk out in the sun? I wasn't too sure about that.
So I don't think and it's one of those things. I don't think we ever got any definitive answer on that scene at the end where they were exposed to the UV light. It seemed to affect Varney a whole lot less than it did Ruthven.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think the closest thing you could say is just that he is affected, but not anywhere near as much as his counterparts with an eye.
Correct. Yeah.
He's older too, right?
I think so. I'm not quite sure, but he seems to be older, but then he treats Ruthven as like, he calls him Lord. And I think it's because Ruthven actually was a lord. Like he actually had like a castle to his name or something. I think they briefly mentioned that. So maybe he actually is a lord when he was first human. I'm not quite sure, but I originally thought that Ruthven was older, and then when we got more of Varney's kind of a little bit of his backstory, it seemed like he actually might be older as far as lived longer, churned, whatever.
That was kind of the vibe I got too. I think, and I just thought of this when you were talking about it, but I think maybe he had a lot of trouble referring to Ruthven as Edmund. Like he had to tell him many times, like, hey, you could refer to me by my first name. And I'm wondering if that's because Ruthven was seen for centuries as the de facto like protector of England or London.
Right.
Maybe that's how Varney saw him, as like he was in a position of like leadership, and so it was disrespectful to call him anything but Lord Ruthven.
Right.
Maybe that's what it was. But I really liked Varney's character. I thought it was the getting to kind of look into and peer into his psyche a little bit, and it was interesting to think about like a vampire who's effectively suffering from depression. Like he's got a lot of self-hate. He's got a lot. I mean, he like you said, he thinks of himself as a monster. He doesn't understand why anybody would want to help him or help any vampire or any of these other supernatural creatures. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting to see, a character that is so powerful in the sense of like his supernatural abilities to have so much hate for himself. And I think that carried over. Like and I may be remembering this incorrectly, so if I am, please correct me. But
I will.
I know you will. I think he was also not. He had a lot of money, but he wasn't as showy with it as Ruthven, right?
Correct. I believe so. Like, I didn't realize he had a crap ton of money till the very end when he was like, "Oh, I have," yeah, like he's like, "I
he had
have
a
a
black
ton of
card.
money," but
Yeah.
right. So maybe he's just, yeah, like you said, he's not as showy. Like he's a recluse. Like he just really just hangs out himself.
And the reason I asked that and I was talking about it is I think that he does that because of how he looks at himself. I think he sees himself as like you said, a monster, and I think he thinks he doesn't deserve to have nice things, and he didn't deserve for for Greta to help him. And there was that whole scene at the beginning where she's trying to heal him and or trying to get the thing out, the tip of the crossblade out of his wound, and he snarls at her,
snaps
literally at her, and when he comes to, he asks Ruthven if he did that. And it was interesting to see, like he was deeply, deeply ashamed of the fact that his animal side was shown, and not only shown, but shown to someone who was trying to help him.
Right. You can see the difference between him and Ruthven. Like Ruthven doesn't seem like he ever would want to ever hurt a fly, like unless he absolutely had to, whereas Varney seems like he has in the past and doesn't have any qualms of doing it if he needs to. Another thing that I like to mention about the whole vampire, it seems like they can't die, right? Like it looks like she kept mentioning like they had a lot of battle wounds, like battle scars, and them dying multiple deaths, and they just kind of come back. So I'm curious to know like if that's going to be explained a little bit better in the other books.
I noticed that too, and I didn't really get it because it's so different than the gothic horror that she's drawing from in the author, and it's also so different.
Vampires can still get stabby,
right? Yeah, there's. I mean, in every other vampire lore that I'm familiar with, there's. I mean, the way that they can die and their weaknesses is everybody that it's tweaked. It's a little bit different, but there's always some way for them to meet the final death. And in this book, it was definitely implied that there wasn't a way for that to happen. At least not
permadeath.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I'm curious to learn more about that.
So yeah, it will be interesting. I'm hoping that she goes more into that in the next book.
And he definitely is a love contender for Helsing. It was very hinted on. Very hinted. Like I didn't, obviously when you first meet him, you're like, there's nothing there. And then all of a sudden, like you get his first point of view of, not like first point of view, but like so the book is third person and it switches between some of them, mostly Greta, but there's sometimes a few of the other actual characters like Fast and Ruthven, Cranswell and Varney. And the first time you get to see his kind of side of the story. He kind of seems like it's like a love at first sight type thing for him and Greta. And it seems like he does that often. Like he kind of mentioned before why he hasn't really been around other people, because the last time he did, like he fell for this girl and kind of like screwed her life up and maybe even like turned her and killed her. I don't know, kind of bases. But it definitely looked like a love at first sight thing for him with her. Like he was definitely like a little obsessed with her. And I thought at first I was like, ew, kind of creepy. And then we kind of learn a little bit more and it's not so creepy. And I was like, oh, this is a potential love interest, a very slow burn love interest.
I loved the scene between Varney and Ruthven in the schwanky 5-star hotel at the very end, when Ruthven has put two and two together and realizes that not only does Varney maybe have a little bit of a crush on Greta, but Greta also might have a thing for Varney, and makes that comment about how he saw her buying the
yes,
what was it, like 18th century, like an 18th century negligee?
Yeah, I guess. Well, but I mean, even Cranswell mentions that he notices that Varney has a thing for Greta, because she's like, oh, I think I might like ask Varney to help Thrall, I believe is what they call it, aka like mind control the monk guy later in the book. And she's like, oh, hopefully he'll help. And Cranswell looks like her and is like, if you're the one who's going to ask, then he's going to do whatever you want. And she's like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, never mind. Yeah. Like, I think everyone but Greta and Varney picked up that they apparently have a little crush on each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, that was another interesting thing, since you mentioned his thrall. Apparently his thrall is much more powerful than Ruthven's ability to do it.
Correct.
Which I thought was interesting too. I didn't know if that was just because he was older or if it was because he was a vampire instead of a vampire.
I think it was maybe more just he had better practice of it. Like maybe he uses it more, like Ruthven doesn't. And they always mention like his reflective eyes and how like his eyes were kind of
like silver pools.
Right. Like maybe he's the vampire have better thralling abilities. I don't know. They didn't really mention why, but she always mentioned how, well, and also the first thing she mentioned was how hypnotic his voice, just normal speaking tone was, and how nice his voice was and all this stuff. It was always his voice. So maybe it's just who he is, maybe as a person. He just got the lucky end of that stick.
All right, so that covers Greta and then our two main vampires, Ruthven and Varney. Let's get into Fast next, who we briefly touched on as the Badass Character Award winner. So Fast is a demon. Right? A demon, an accountant.
Yeah, like we kind of learn a little bit more about his history and what he actually is, because apparently like Greta never asked, Ruthven never asked, because she's like, I've known him since a kid. Like he was her father's best friend, and he kind of took over in protecting her when her father passed away. And so she always felt kind of awkward, like asking him what he actually was. She just knew he was a supernatural. She didn't know exactly what he was. And of course we get Hanswell, who's like, so exactly what are you? So he explains that he is in fact a fallen angel, essentially, and from hell. Like he is a demon. And that's why he's got all these cool powers.
Fallen angel, demon. He described his job as like being an accountant of souls. You learn later on that he's bestie with the devil, one of his best friends. Fast was a really cool character. There was a lot of depth to him, and it was again, it's kind of like the vampires seeing like a different side of that character. It's the same thing with Fast as a demon. I really liked how I think the author did a really good job at humanizing all of these creatures that are traditionally in literature and movies and TV shows as evil, and letting us see them in a different light, even the devil, which we'll get into in a minute. But I really, really liked the character of Fast. His powers were awesome, like especially when we get to the end and you get to see kind of like the full breadth of his powers in the sewer scene. But it was also really cool to see how much he cared for Greta. It was, Fast was almost like her father figure, right?
Yeah,
because it was
pretty much
her dad's best friend. You find out that he promised Greta's father that he would keep her safe and take care of her and watch over her. And they have this really special connection that
literally
the author that's what I was about to talk about. That the author describes as like he inhabits a part of Greta's mind because he's able to read minds as one of his powers. And when a long time ago she gave him permission to.
When her father passed away, she felt lonely, and he went into her mind and said, "You don't have to be alone. I'll be here if you want me to." And so she allowed him to have that little part of him in her, I guess.
Yeah,
in her
because
mind.
then he was literally always with her.
Correct. Always one.
So he was a very interesting character, lots of depth. I really liked Fast, and he kind of seems like he's sick most of the book, right? We see he has, I don't know, what would you call he's got bad cough, like he's got like bronchitis,
bad lungs, some lung
demon bronchitis going on.
Yeah.
And so he's weakened in the sense that it seems like the entirety of the book he's not quite full strength. Like there's always
not even close, because like he has all these cool abilities and powers, but he can only use them short term because it's very taxing on him.
Right,
like very taxing on him. Like he can, read minds. He can make people not realize that he's there, and pretty much shield everyone else that he's touching so they don't see them. He like astro projects different planes to like find people, and he knows people's different, I wouldn't say sense because it's not a smell thing, it's a sight thing, but like people have different, I don't know, souls. Like he looks at soul. It's like this whole, like these cool powers that he has. He can pretty much get you from point A to point B, all of these cool abilities, but they're very limited in the sense that he can only use a little bit of it,
right?
Or he overexerts himself and starts hacking up a lung again type thing.
Right. That was a really good way to describe that. His investigation powers, where he would, like you were talking about, like go into another plane to kind of zone in and get into what he was trying to figure out the answer to, reminded me a lot of, if any of our listeners out there are readers or watchers of the comic or show Invincible, the demon detective in that is reminded me a whole lot of there's a character, Barbara, since I know you haven't read or watched this, that is a demon and literally shows up throughout the show as they're investigating. Essentially the Justice League equivalent in this comic world gets murdered. And he shows up, he's like investigating. He's got like the full trench coat, looks like a PI. His powers reminded me of Fast and him, and in the investigatory sense, the demonic abilities being used to kind of sniff things out and follow the trail of a crime and that kind of stuff. And obviously in this book, shifting back to Strange Practice, he uses that to, I mean, he's the one that effectively figures out where the secret society is. In the sense
he follows the trail of the guy that attacked Greta.
And they find him in the church after being nearly beaten to death and excommunicated. And of course, Greta being Greta instead of...
I mean, it's her oath that she takes. It is an oath as a doctor that you take, that you're supposed to treat everybody, regardless of who they are. He
teleports them with much effort from the church back to her clinic to treat him.
He definitely was a very interesting character. Just the more we learn about him and what he is, and also how he explained that there's heaven and hell and angels and demons, but they're not like against each other. They actually like work with each other to keep the balance. He says there's a balance, and what the monks were, and he's like, he's like, there's definitely human, but there's some supernatural aspect of it. And then they ask like, oh, is it one of yours? And he's like, no, it's neither of ours. And if it was, like, we would have known, and it's funny, like the way that the society of angels and demons, it sounds like it's like this, I don't even know, like this balance between them, and they all have like accountants that keep check of all the people here. And if like something goes a little bit wrong, then they kind of interfere and step in. But yeah, so it's like the society within a society that they have, and they keep kind of each other in check and balance, and it seems like they're BFFs essentially. And I thought that was a really, really cool take actually on it, because that's always like mortal enemies, and it's like they're actually not. Like they work together for the balance of this world that they're currently inhabiting. I thought it was interesting to learn, like they call, like he can go into a church and stuff, but it just kind of gives him a headache,
Right.
He can touch angelic devices, but it kind of gives him a headache, or like it kind of does that. And it's like vice versa too for them. And
he uses silk, he said, to touch it, right?
Yeah. No, silk is the vampires.
Okay.
I thought.
And so the silk was brought up
or
as
the silk for everybody,
but he mentioned that they use it to handle angelic.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So it's just a very interesting take of the demon character, or the class, or whatever you want to say. And I thought that was really interesting. And his character is just very interesting as well.
Very
like he's just a
character.
Non-descriptive 50-year-old passing male character.
Yep.
Is how he's kind of described.
And I definitely, a little bit later, we're going to get into the whole scene at the ending, that talk about what Fast did there, but let's cover the rest of the characters here first. So the next one would be Cranswell, which is the human friend of Ruthven. He is he the curator, or is he just an employee at the museum?
So he's an employee, and this was his first time curating a piece, and he's like, I'm going to screw it up and all this other stuff. But yes. So
Cranswell is he's that person. He's friends with Ruthven. Ruthven enjoys
his family.
Yeah, I know his
family was originally also fighters of vampires and all that jazz, and then they were a curious family, so instead of like killing them, they decided to talk to them, and then became friends with Ruthven.
Yep. Cranswell's like his researcher, effectively. Like we were introduced to Cranswell as Ruthven's trying to figure out more about these people that are killing, or that are trying to kill supernatural beings, and he goes to Cranswell to try to learn like about the blade, right? Because it's after Greta gets attacked, he takes the blade that she has to Cranswell.
No, that was before.
Was that before? Wow. Getting my things a little bit out of order, but
it's okay.
I liked Cranswell's character. He wasn't a major character by any means, but in some ways he was like the stereotypical intelligent character. Like he was the one that asked the questions, and he had no filter when it came to like his interest or thirst for knowledge. Like you mentioned earlier, like no one felt like it was polite to ask Fast what he was, and Cranswell was just like, "What are you?"
Right.
Just asked. I mean,
I think it's because he's outside of Greta, he's the only other human character that we get here, right? on top of that, Greta is pretty much in the supernatural world. Like, she rarely it seems like she hangs out with the human part, even though she is a human. Whereas Cranswell, I feel like he's more like, whereas Greta is like full on supernatural, everything her life involves around this. Whereas I feel like he knows about the Society of the Supernatural, but he's not like directly involved up until this point. Now he is, but before he really wasn't. I think his only claim to it was like Ruthven and helping him out, but I don't think he had ever met any other supernatural, I don't think. And so when he kind of gets thrust upon this world, like, he's what us readers would be like, he's the one who kind of helps readers follow along with the stuff because we learn through him.
Yeah, that's a really good way of describing him.
So I thought he was really interesting. I would say he was important in the sense that he helped. Like, he's the one who finds the book that has what the secret society is calling themselves. He's kind of the humor one aspect out of them too. He's always dropping really funny one-liners, and then he helps them kind of try to bring down the monks, essentially.
And he technically is the one that
since Varney and Ruthven couldn't get close to this entity because it was using a UV light source to spew its crazy knowledge to these little crazy monk people, essentially.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, he was a pretty important character. So speaking of the entity, I want to talk about the monks a little bit. And I don't think beyond, well, we get the one guy's name sort of, but I don't remember what it is. We learn his real name. The most we really get of the monks, aside from the scenes where people get attacked, is when Greta and Fast find the monk dying in the church, and she tries to heal him, and they end up getting quite a bit of information out of him because he's been excommunicated. And it was very interesting to see whenever there was a scene where she was talking to him or another character was speaking to him, there was like this internal struggle going on within him of like between himself, the real person behind the blue eyes, and the entity that had effectively possessed these monks doing what they're doing. So that was really interesting.
Should you describe what the monks look like? So they were humans, right? From what we learned in the book, they were studying religion. They were at
seminary,
and then they stumble upon like this little crazy part of sect of this religion that they decide to join, and then this entity takes over their minds, whatever. But to take over their minds, like we said, it's this UV thing. So they literally have to like pray to this UV light bulb, essentially.
Yeah.
And it pretty much burns like what they've been sitting down and praying to it, or kneeling down and praying to it. So like they're all creepily burned, like really badly burned, and pretty much because they're staring at this UV thing, that they're eggs. And she keeps describing them as cooked eggs as for their eyes. And that mental image will never leave me. It's really effing creepy. And I love eggs, but now I don't think I can see an egg without thinking creepy. Like, my eyes are going to be like, that's essentially what does happen though with the UV light. Will cook your eyeballs, and it looks like nasty ass eggs. So it's like hard boiled eggs in their eyeballs.
Yep.
But
they glow blue.
Because it's a supernatural being type thing that's controlling them. So he pretty much blinds them and then gives them sight through this creepy blue light. And that's how characters see them, is because they have really creepy UV light blue eyes that can see things that most normal things wouldn't be able to see. Like, they can see through walls and all this crap, and it's creepy blue eyes. So that was a fun little visual for you of what they look like.
Definitely creepy looking.
With Benedictine robes.
And we learn a lot about their society from the one that has been excommunicated, and Greta's trying to heal unsuccessfly, I might add. Like, she
does heal until he pulls himself away from the thralls of the thing controlling him.
And then he stops healing
because he's not supernatural anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, if any human would have taken that much burn, like, you just died. That's too much burn, all of third-degree burns over too much percentage of your body, on top of then your burns get infected. It's a whole thing. Like, you don't die of the burn, you die of infection, essentially. And that's what was happening to him after he pulled himself away from the thing that was controlling him.
Right. And so now that we know what the monks look like, you can better envision this scene where so now that we've got some idea of the monks and what they look like, I want to talk about my favorite scene in the book, which was the climax, the grand finale, the big fight at the end. So the main characters have finally located the lair, so to speak, of the the monks, and they're going there to try to stop they don't really know what this entity or thing is, but they're going there because they know it's where it's at to stop it. And they arrive and they split up. Varney and Ruthven and Cranswell go one way, and Fast goes the other way. And Fast encounters two monks in the hallway, and this is when we finally get to see Fast in his true demonic form. In the hallway, he stops them with his power, and then I believe floats off the ground. Am I correct in saying that? And
because he uses his wings
and sprouts the wings with feathers, feathered wings, white feathered wings, and is literally floating there in the hallway. And he has a grip on the two monks' minds, their souls. He's trying to separate their souls from the entity and kind of rip them apart. We see that back and forth it's cutting between him doing this and Ruthven and Varney and Cranswell sneaking around trying to figure out where the boss is, so to speak. And then all of a sudden, and we see that one of the monks has snuck up on Fast. And
not one of the monks. So there's two monks protecting the entity, and the rest of the monks went out to pretty much bomb the whole city and burn it down. And then he doesn't realize that when Ruthven, Cranswell, and Varney find the entity and start trying to kill it, that he commanded them to come back, and then they go and stab Fast in the back.
They stab him in the back with the crossblade, and Fast dies.
Yes.
Greta forces the ghouls to... She convinces the ghouls to take...
They help her. Like, they're the ones who told her about it. They're like, oh, there's, maybe we can pretty much shut it down by doing this. And she's like, oh, why didn't we even think about this? And then the ghoul, Mirwop, something like that.
I think,
which is Creoc's son, takes her to where the off switch for the underground.
It was like an electrical substation for the London Underground.
So takes her over there, and she turns it off long enough for Cranswell to like smack the crap out of the entity.
Yep.
And while Fast is dying, he calls upon, and then now you can continue, since I know you want to say that.
Oh, right. So she turns off the switch, breaks the connection between the entity and Cranswell's mind because he's trying to control him to stop him from attacking him. Gives him just enough time to go over there and whack it and break the thing, which is like effectively, like you described it as a light bulb, which I think is accurate. It's effectively a light bulb, an ancient or old timey light bulb. And so at the same time, Fast is dying, and Greta thinks that whatever she has done to turn off, whatever the switch turned off is the cause for Fast's death. And so she quickly flips the switch back on, but luckily the power was off long enough to distract the entity, and Cranswell is able to take it out. But while Fast is laying there dying, he starts speaking and calling out the name Samael and saying he wants to come home. And we know that we know home for him is hell, and we find out who Samael is a moment later.
Well, you kind of already knew because he mentions to Greta that he's BFFs with Sam, and she's like, "It's really weird you're calling the devil Sam."
You're on the first name basis with the devil.
Yeah.
So he summons Sam or Samael, which is the devil. And so the devil shows up actually not where Fast is first. He shows up in the room with Varney, a very injured Ruthven, somewhat injured Varney, and a dazed Cranswell, and this floating blue orb, which he quickly contains.
Yep.
If the visual I got of this, so they said he contained it, and then kind of, it's like he put it in his backpack. Like it's like if you have like an adventure, like if you have a bag that has like a holster for your sword, that's like he just kind of took this and contained it and stuck it there on his shoulder and went on about his business. Is kind of how I visualized that.
Yeah.
So he contains this entity and then runs over and flies over rather, and stands over Fast's body. And this is when
Greta was weeping over.
Yes, that was a pretty intense scene.
I know, that was sad.
Animalistic guttural sounds they described her making over his body, thinking he's dead. And Sam comes up, or the devil comes up, and starts talking, and is just mentions. Was it at that point? Does he revive him first, or does he talk about how he should have come home to get healed first? Because he talks to Greta some before. I feel like. Anyway, so eventually he resurrects Fast, And then I think it's afterwards he gives him a hard time for not you're clearly very sick.
It was that bad.
Didn't realize you were that sick. You should have come home. We find out that the devil's personal doctor is Faust, which I thought was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Greta actually makes a deal with Sam to get to have a meeting with Faust at some point, and said that could be arranged. So what were your thoughts on how not necessarily the whole scene, but like the character of Sam or Samael, how she portrayed the devil in...
I mean, so going off of what I said earlier is that they're not evil or in the general's eye sense that like we as a society sees it. Like he's just someone that causes some ruckus because the natural order needs to be balanced. So there's, the angels and the devils or whatever, demons, and he is just one of those. And obviously he even mentions, he's like, technically I'm a fallen angel. Like he even mentions that he is a fallen angel at one point.
Yep.
I think he was cool because, I mean, he is kind of what you picture, because the devil, described is technically like was God's best angel before he fell, so the book describes him as this very good looking character with like cherub looking, blonde, curly, cherub looking hair. And technically he's supposed to have like really, really vivid type blue eyes, but sometimes he doesn't. It's like red pinpoint eyes. And then he kind of switches it back to blue and, wings or whatever. And when it's Cranswell describing him, he's like, this is kind of weird. I'm not sure if I should be looking at him or not. But I thought it was interesting. He's a really cool character. Hopefully we get to find out more about him.
I hope that we get, I would be happy with a full book that took place, like that all the supernaturals in that book were all like the angels and demons and stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get that because Greta's the main focus here.
I know, but it would be cool. That's all I'm saying. I was going to ask you to describe for our listeners the true identity of the entity. Kind of get into that a little bit.
I mean, it's a leftover revenant, I think is what they call it.
Remnant.
Leftover remnant. Right, revenant is literally like a ghost or something. Remnant of just an inanimate thing that just is neither good nor bad. And then this one like was a remnant of something that had a mind of its own, and so that's why it kind of turned into what it was. It's a little entity that had started creating it knew what it wanted, and that was it liked feeding off of fear and anger and that type of stuff from the human world. So it just kind of came from centennial beings, right? Like it wasn't supposed to have any of these things, or I don't know how to describe that. Like it wasn't supposed to have.
It wasn't supposed to be sentient. It was. It was almost like it was described as like a tool of God when He created it, like during creation.
Right, and it was just like it's a leftover thing that wasn't supposed to be neither here nor there, and then all of a sudden he kind of got thought processing and was able to process things, and all of a sudden wanted more and more and more, and just kind of grew from that, and finally found, I don't know, a light bulb that it wanted to hang out in, I guess, and then like could project its mind controlling powers better, essentially, I guess. Like
that's pretty much it, yeah.
I mean, it was kind of slightly in a letdown in the sense that like I didn't quite understand. Like I knew what it was, but like it feels like barely touched upon, so it wasn't like really like I thought it would be something more extravagant, but to know it's just like this little blue orb that like had powers and just kind of formed itself was kind of a slight like letdown. I'm just like, okay, like all this trouble for this creepy little light bulb type thing.
Like the final battle was amazing. I loved that scene and everything that went with it, but figuring out what like the big bad, so to speak, was a little bit anticlimactic when you find out what it actually is.
But I mean, I guess it makes sense because, like I said, it's not a demon, and demons aren't bad in this world. Like they're just there. It's part of life. And so I guess I'm glad she didn't go that route, but just for it to be like this little creepy blue orb thing that was like, I like fear and I like to feed off the fear of men. It's kind of weird. And so, okay.
I did love the scene though. So we learn all of this about the remnant because Samael is describing what it is and where it came from. And there's at the end of that, he he makes this offhand remark that, like, in a tone of frustration, but oh man, I guess I have to schedule a meeting with Gabriel now. Like to like,
right, like
like
this
this,
shouldn't
like,
have happened.
like he's
Yeah.
but it came off as like a coworker. It's like, I gotta schedule a
Right.
meeting with my coworker Gabriel. It's like, I'm gonna have to have a sit down, and it's like, I just thought that was kind of funny how offhanded that was.
Right.
And,
Like this can't be happening, and like there are little people that are in place to like count the balance of the world kind of was on vacation or something, and this is why this happened as long as it did. And
Yep.
he's like, oh, they gotta go talk to my coworker now, and
Yep.
so this doesn't happen again. Roll eyes type thing.
because it was whoever was like in that role for London that was on vacation or something, right? That's
right.
why.
He was like they were stepped off their post for too long or something
Yeah.
to that effect. So
Yep.
interesting.
It was interesting. I hope we get more of his character in future books, and we'll see. I don't know what they're even about. So the last character or characters that I wanted to talk about were the ghouls, just kind of in general. I really enjoyed. You don't get a lot of. There's not a ton of scenes with them. There's, but the ones that we do get are really interesting. And I thought the way that she described them and like their mannerisms and the way that they sneak around and like they like to be in the shadows, and the whole thing where Greta offered up Ruthven's basement without asking him, like for the ghouls to come there for safe haven, but at the same time, like that he was super okay with that because he wanted them to be somewhere safe too.
Right. And then the scene with him with the little baby ghoul
Yes.
was so cute. She
It
was like, I'd never seen him look like so happy with this little baby in his arms, and he was
Yep.
like, ooh, baby.
He was trying to comfort the baby, right? Because that was when
Mhm.
we find out that the infant
He
has
has
like
a
a
little
little ear
infection.
infection,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really interesting scene too, where Greta has diagnosed that it's an ear infection and is trying to convey to the mother, who doesn't speak English, through a translator, Kriok, who does speak English,
Right.
kind of going back and forth in Ghoulish, to let her treat him with human medicine,
Right. Yeah.
amoxicillin, if I remember right. I thought the ghouls are very interesting. I hope we get more lore about them, maybe more involvement with their characters in the future books, because I would say that their biggest involvement in this book was the end, like when with the scene we were just talking about, when they helped Greta get to the
Greta
substation.
because if without her, then they would have died essentially.
Right. Oh, and we should also talk about the other thing we missed in that scene, when the reason that they leave is that Ruthven's house gets firebombed.
Oh yes, the reason why Greta leaves, because she was supposed to stay behind because she is the doctor, and they thought because she's so important to the supernatural people of London that they didn't want to put her at risk, and so she stays behind in Ruthven's mansion, and then the monks find out where she lives, where I guess she's hiding, or where their base of operation is, and firebomb the whole place. And she escapes, and the monk that she was trying to save pretty much forces her to leave him because she was trying to help him, and he's like, no, like, you're too important, like, go, whatever. And so she runs away, and the ghouls help her, and they pretty much defend the house and do it well, I believe, because she was worried about the house and all that stuff. So they help her with the house, and that's when she gets this idea of like, why didn't we just kill the switch on this thing instead of trying to make this elaborate plan of destroying it?
Right.
And that's where Mirlop or Mir something helps her to the underground. And that's kind of their involvement. I mean, they pretty much helped Greta save everyone, so they were an important part of
They played a pretty big role at the end, and they all survived, the ones that were fighting for the house, probably partially because they're talented, because it was implied they were very skilled fighters, and I think also partially because at some point during that fight they would have been summoned back abruptly by the entity, probably too, right?
The monks?
Yeah.
I mean?
Right.
Well, I mean, the monks can just throw the firebomb, and then just leave. They don't have to do much. They were trying to do that all over London, though. So luckily they didn't do that.
Right, because they got summoned back. Their master was about to get hurt. So I think that covers all the characters. The other thing I wanted to talk about, which we haven't gone into, I don't think we talked about yet, is the actual ending. So that the resolution that happens after the big battle, which I thought parts of were very comical, and especially when Ruthven finds out his house has been destroyed, and he and Varney go on a shopping spree to get
Right.
to get
make
all
him feel
sorts.
better.
Yes, to make him feel better. And he uses Varney's credit card, I believe, to buy all this stuff to make him feel better. But then I think she mentions like I think like online transfers money back to
Ruthven said that he would pay it all back.
So we get that, and they're going on this shopping spree, and we find out Greta and her helpers have been healing the ghouls that were wounded in the standoff at Ruthven's house. And then since Ruthven's house, it's going to take quite a while for the insurance and everything to get that rebuilt. He decides to take the entire group. Oh, sorry, before I get there. At the end of the fight, Fast and Samael go back to hell.
For Fast to heal.
Samael convinces Fast to come home to let Faust heal him properly. And so he's gone. And the rest of the group, Ruthven decides they're going to let's go on holiday to Greece. Correct?
Well, but before that, like Ruthven pretty much turns to Greta and says, like, I don't know why I never offered to buy you like state of the art stuff to treat for your practice, since like you're such an important person for the supernatural. And like he kind of realized how much she does, and he was kind of kicked himself, was like, I don't know why I never offered to like help your practice. So he pretty much tells her anything that she wants, he's going to buy. So like state of the art, pretty much everything, and a whole new paint coat for her practice, and pretty much put it up to better standards and state of the art machinery to help her with all that. So he just said like, he's like, oh, you know, I pride myself in taking care of London, but like you help the supernatural, and like I want to have a better role in that. And so that he's like pretty much her benefactor essentially. So
yeah. But after all of that, that is when he decides to take them all on holiday to Greece. And there's that scene we were talking about before where they're like he and Ruthven and Varney are hanging in the hotel room. And he kind of
balcony, and they're
jabs him about
they're watching
Greta buying
because they're watching Greta and Cranswell. I guess they rented a sailboat, and they're trying to sail this boat,
right? And
they're watching them. They're like, oh, they're having so much fun and all this stuff. And then Varney kind of tries to say like, oh, don't they look like a nice pair? But instead of like it coming like playful, it just sounds like he's jealous essentially. And Ruthven's like, bro, like open up your eyes. Like she's not interested in him. She's interested in you. And Varney's like, what are you talking about? And that's when he mentions the whole, she bought some apparently 18th century lingerie or whatever the heck it
right,
is,
like an old nightgown or something.
Right.
And then he mentions
like,
this
balcony is attached to your balcony. Like little comment. So
and Barney's reaction, like he blushes, like I would never. Like it was kind of a fun scene. And then
it ends with Fast coming back to them. And
yes. Arriving back.
I have a feeling that this is going to be the core group, right? Like it's going to be Greta, Ruthven, Fast, Cranswell, and Varney.
Which, if that's the case, I would be okay with that. I liked the characters.
It's a good group of characters. Yeah,
very good group of characters. And it's also going to be interesting, if you're right about this being the core group, to see Fast in the next book at full power. If he's fully healed.
Like, right. I'm curious to know how that's going to be. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that'll be really interesting. So I guess to include one former question we used to always ask, will you read, or do you plan to read the follow-up books in this series?
Oh, I do. Yeah. 100%. I liked it enough to keep reading the series, and I really liked it. So yeah, I plan on reading them.
Yeah. I think I'll at least read the second one. I want to see what happens, and we'll see how that book goes. And if I like
I'm invested in the slow burn romance that is Varney and Greta. So if I know anything of slow burns, it means we won't get our payout until the third book. So I am invested fully until the third book.
Barbara's invested in the ship.
Yes, I ship them.
She shipped them
forever. I also want to touch base. So the world that this takes place is just like normal London, whatever, and then obviously paranormal London. And that's like, there's nothing cool about that. It's just London. But the supernatural aspect that she brought in, and how she took these different folklores and folk tales from vampires, ghouls, mummies, wares, whatever you want to say, all these supernatural beings and entities, and kind of put her own spin on it. That's I think what sold me on this. I think that was really interesting to me because I wanted to learn more about these characters because of that. I think that would be the selling point for me. So I think if you're interested in this type of lore and you want a new spin, because I feel like right now, we got a little bit of the whole vampire like too much of, like all these things were coming out for supernatural and stuff. We got a little too much of that. But I think this kind of, for me at least, because I used to read a lot of these books about the supernatural, and then I kind of just got overwhelmed in too much of it and kind of seeked other books. And this, for me, breathed like new life into my love of the supernatural, where I want to maybe pick up some more books because it was so different, and I enjoyed her take on these characters in the supernatural world. So I think she did a good world building in a sense of that particular thing. Like the setting, just normal London, cool setting, doesn't do too much for me, but the supernatural aspect of it, I think she did a really stellar job.
I agree. It was a really good job turning London into like the playground for this urban fantasy. As far as scoring on this one, we talked about the group score before, which was a 7 out of 7. But what was your individual score for this one?
I gave it a 7, which I guess looking back on it, we didn't really touch base of why, because I think we just mentioned the why we liked it. Mm-hmm. So I gave it a 7. I think it had potential. I would like to know more about these characters and their backstory. The whole monk, that I thought the mystery was a little lacking for me. I feel like that might have been the part that it needed to be more fleshed out. Like it wasn't much, like we knew kind of who they were in the sense like there was no like, oh, maybe it was this, and then it was like, no, it's this. Like they found the book, they found the sect pretty much within it, and then the monk attacks her, so you know exactly who they were. So there wasn't much of a mystery to be solved, I don't believe. Maybe like who was controlling these things, like we didn't know that was a thing until much later, and then it kind of turns out to just kind of be an insignificant type thing, so it wasn't really like you could have solved that really. So I feel like maybe that could have been fleshed out more. The saving grace for me was the characters and the supernatural aspect of the book. I really enjoyed that, so I guess that's why it's a 7. I didn't think it was slow. I think the pacing was fine for me, because when there wasn't quote unquote action scenes or things going on, we were learning about this world and these characters, and so that's why I enjoyed it.
That's fair. I gave it a 7 because I really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed the story that she told. It got negative marks from me, so to speak, because I didn't like the pacing. I thought there were times that it really dragged, times that it didn't. I mean, it went back and forth, but there were definitely stretches that it dragged. And obviously, these ratings are like our personal opinions, and different people have different opinions. But I think part of it for me was also the chapters in this book were very, very long. And it's just my personal preference. I don't need chapters to be like, 2 minutes. Like Barbara always references like a James Patterson chapter, which if you've read any of his books, they're very quick chapters, and I don't need them to be that fast. But I also don't like when reading on the Kindle, you flip to the next page, like 33 minutes left in chapter. It's like, oh man, it's a long one. That's just not my thing. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the story, but I think that may have contributed to the pacing issues for me too. Just the mental awareness that it was just this is how long this chapter is. That was definitely part of why I gave it a 7, because I didn't feel like I enjoyed every bit of the book. There were parts that I thought were boring. That's why it's a 7. We determined the second or third time Barbara and I gave a book the same score. Doesn't happen very often.
Nope. Once
Lauren's back next month, that this probably never happen, where there'll never be. That would be interesting if all 3 of us gave a book the same score.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think that'll ever happen. That would be, it would be interesting. It'd be cool if it did, but I don't think it probably will.
I mean, unless it's like Harry Potter or something like that, but no, I don't think so, because we have very different likes of books.
We do. Yep, we very much do, even though there's overlap there, but everybody's going to have something they like a lot and something like a little less.
Like I think you and your sister are the opposite spectrum, whereas I'm kind of the more in the middle. Like I like both of the books that you guys read and my own, and you guys are a little.
It is usually it's Lauren and I on one side or the other, and then you're usually
in the middle. Yeah,
usually right in the middle of us, which is always kind of funny.
Correct. But, yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
So if you got to this point, thank you very much for listening. As always, we are Badass Literature Society. Hopefully you liked the episode. If you did, let us know. Leave us a rating or a review. That stuff is really important. We love reading your feedback on whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever it is you listen. If you've got a book you'd like us to read or a recommendation, let us know. Give us a comment or send us a message on either Instagram or Facebook. In both places, our handle is @BadassLitPod. Again, next month, we're reading the Southern Book Club Guide to... It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful, that title. It's a mouthful. Me.
Are you having like issues with it? It's just the Southern Book Club Guide to Slaying Vampires.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah.
Southern Book Club Guide to Slaying Vampires. That's what's coming up next month. Like I said a minute ago, Lauren will be back next month as well. So the Badass Literature Trio will be back in full force. And with that, we'll see you guys then. I'm Michael.
I'm Barbara. Bye.
Bye.